Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, respected brothers and sisters. Welcome to the second episode of our series of discussions. I don't really like to use the word lecture because our approach isn't one of lecturing, but it will be a series of discussions on the topic of the companions of our beloved messenger, peace be upon him, and his family. Last week, first before I begin, apologies for reasons beyond our control. We had some difficulties, and the program did not conclude. We simply had to discontinue the program due to that problem, that issue. But by then, I think we are one and a half hours in, and in truth, the cutoff came at a good point. We'd more or less concluded the specific topic area, and it was the right time essentially to tie things up. So apologies for last week. Obviously, it's live TV. It even happens on big shows on normal terrestrial TV stations. Things go wrong. Normally they can continue and the show must go on. But obviously, if we have those difficulties today, for example, early on, we will inshallah abide by the same principle and try and work and get the program back on. But if after an hour or so it does happen, then you can probably call it an early night. In terms of that kind of addresses last week's problem and any potential problems this week. Let me quickly introduce the brothers who will be presenting the arguments and discussion material today. Same brothers as last week. So we've got Sayyid Ridha.
Assalamualaikum.
And we've got Sayyid Ali. So now where do we begin? We begin, really it'd be nice to just provide a kind of a summary of last week's episode. Last week's discussion, we discussed the concept of who is the Sahaba by definition. And what did we learn? Did we have anything conclusive? No. When we went through the works of Ahlus Sunnah on this topic area, nothing was clear cut. We understood that there's a variety of different definitions amongst the Sunni sect over who is a Sahaba. There's been a general assumption, a general sort of thinking, if you ever discuss it with our Sunni brothers and sisters, and they'll say it's just anybody who saw the Prophet and died on Iman. But from an academic perspective, the ulama of Ahlus Sunnah have not provided a general consensus definition. They varied between those who saw the Prophet and died on Iman, to those who saw the Prophet for a certain period of time, to those who didn't just see the Prophet but accompanied him on military campaigns. So if they partook in a certain number of campaigns, they would fall within the ambit definition of Sahaba. And then, of course, we then also had a definition by the companion Salman Farsi.
There's slight bit of static coming from your side. I don't know.
From my side?
Yeah, I don't know if it's your headphones or not.
Hold on.
Could be your headphones.
It could be.
It sounds like.
Can you not hear me?
Well, I can hear you. It's just the slight bit of static.
Okay, I can take my headphones out. Should I take them out?
Yeah, it probably might be better.
Much better.
That's better.
Okay. So we discussed that topic area, and we whilst we went through the different definitions and there's no consensus over them, we ended really with what Salman Farsi radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, in which he said essentially the Sahaba by definition are those that shall enter paradise with the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family. So he, based on his own experiences, gave a completely different definition. So our conclusion in the last episode was one of confusion. There is actually no absolute agreement amongst our Sunni brothers and sisters over how we would define Sahaba. So when we have these sort of discussions and debates on this topic area, we don't really know what angle we're coming from. Nothing is clear cut. What are we going to do today? We're going to continue the discussion because obviously Sahaba is one thing. Not only is there confusion over the definition of Sahaba, the next key topic area, which is essentially where our sects differ, lies on the topic of the adala of the Sahaba. There is a doctrine amongst our Sunni brothers and sisters that all the Sahaba are adul, just, and essentially a quick definition for them, they would say just by just they would mean individuals that are just in terms of their persons of good character, and they're honest in the sense that they would never narrate anything incorrect about the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. That's in terms of a quick understanding of that definition. But when we go through the works of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we will try to explain to you what, when you go down and try to understand it, what it means, and how even there's a discrepancy. But because this is a key area of dispute between the two sects, it's important first we go through some detail in terms of how it's defined, and thereafter we will provide an analysis. I will go through what those definitions are. Sayyid Ali, I will explain what adala is and its broad consensus definition. Sayyid Ali will also then comment on it, and then Brother Rida will also talk about the concept of accepting or criticizing narrators. So I think we kick off now. Let's start with myself. I will give some sort of explanation on how we define adala of the Sahaba. Sayyid Ali, could you start getting the scans ready? Thank you very much. So, in terms of definitions, bear with me a second, brothers and sisters. I'm just trying to pull up my texts as well. Okay, let's start. Okay, Sayyid Ali, if you tell me when you've got each scan, please, brother. Yeah. So the first reference I'm going to give to explain the meaning of adala is from Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Do you have it up, brother? Sayyid Ali? Do you have it up, the scan? Okay, so Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani's text, Nuzut al-Nadir, page 69. A just person is someone that has the inner ability to uphold God, fairness, and honor stature. God-fearingness, taqwa, means to refrain from bad deeds, including shirk, immorality, and innovation. So essentially, it's a person of good conduct, which is an understandable concept. If you think somebody's a just individual, what would you associate with it? You would associate a person that is that has this element of taqwa and decency, a man of moral fiber. So essentially, that's the definition that Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani had given for what a just person is. Now, this is, don't forget, we just first of all try to understand what a just person is, but we will then apply it thereafter to the Sahaba. How it's been applied by Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but that's how a just person is defined. Next text, Khatib al-Baghdadi. The text that we're quoting is Al-Kifaya fi Riwayah, volume 10, pages 80 to 81. Okay. A just person. Sayyid Ali, do you have the text up?
It's up, Sayyid.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, brother. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm just, bear with me a second. Sorry about this. Okay. Khatib Baghdadi's text. A just person is someone who is known to practice all of his obligations and acts upon what is commanded. Furthermore, he refrains from what is prohibited, avoids immorality that can lead him down, upholds truth and obligation in his actions and dealings, and avoids saying that negatively which affects his religion and honor. Therefore, anyone in this state is classified as just in his religion, and he should be well known in truthfulness, and merely avoiding bigger sins is not enough to be considered just. So, but other sins should be avoided too. So again, this is a bit of an expansion on obviously what the first text of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said. Obviously, he kind of broke it down a bit further. So in terms of those actions of immorality, those actions that bring an individual down. So if you partake in them, they bring your character down with it. that flies in the face of what a just individual is, and hence this is what you would expect from an individual that is just. He's a man of moral fiber. He doesn't partake in those activities which will bring shame on him. Okay, so those are two definitions in terms of how you would define a just individual. Now let's apply that to how Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah then have a doctrine called Adala of the Sahaba. Like I said in my opening, Adala of the Sahaba means that a doctrine that all the Sahaba are just individuals. So let's go to the texts. The very first text that I think we will go to is from Ibn Hibban. Let me just say, Sayyid Ali, let me just make sure we've got it up. Sayyid Ali, do we have Ibn Hibban's text, please? Have you got it? Okay.
Yeah, so you don't need to worry. It's all up there for you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Ibn Hibban, verily, all the companions, note here, all the companions are just, and there is no one amongst them who is criticized in narrating hadiths, that means, and neither is any of them a weak narrator. Now, we've quoted that text from Sahih Ibn Hibban, Volume 1, page 162. So note that very carefully, brothers and sisters who are listening. They are all just, and they can't be criticized when they narrate a hadith. There's never going to be a doubt over their testimony. So we go to Ibn Kathir. Sorry, we call it Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir, Ikhtisar Ulum al-Hadith, page 277. Now, what does this text tell us? Again, it's a repetition, essentially, more condensed to what Ibn Hibban said. All the companions are just as per Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So essentially, that sets the position out of the Sunni sect. They are all just individuals. Ibn Hajar al-Makki, the very famous text that was written against the Shias here, on Sawa'iq al-Murika, Volume 2, page 640. Ibn Salah al-Nawawi and al-Nawawi have said that all the Sahaba are adul, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, had 114,000 companions when he died. Both the Quran and reports from the Prophet are clear on them being just and they being exalted, and what happened between them had reasons that can't be mentioned in this book. Whilst, it's interesting that final sentence, and inshallah ta'ala, we will discuss what went between them in later episodes. The important point here is, yet again, he's hammering home a point that all the companions are deemed adul. 114,000 were around, had passed away when the Prophet died, and hence, by definition, all 114,000 of the said individuals were just individuals. Okay, that brings us to the next text. A renowned scholar of tafsir and tarikh and Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Shafi scholar, Jalaluddin Suyuti. And we're quoting from Tadrib al-Rawi, page 674. What does Suyuti say? All the companions are just, including one that was involved in a period of trial, that means the fitna, and others, as per the consensus of the people that are to be relied upon. So whatever that period of time they went through, the fitna is typically the period of Jamal and Safina, the fitna during the Caliphate of Amir al-Mu'mineen. For them, that's irrelevant. The very fact that they are Sahaba places them in this kind of a immunity bracket. By implication, by their being the Prophet's companions, it doesn't matter what turmoil or trials and tribulations they went through or challenges. The very fact that they are companions by definition makes them just, and nothing can impact on that in any way. The next text, Shawkani, again, a very, very famous scholar of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, from his book Irshad al-Fuhul, Volume 1, page 341. Verily, all the companions are just. So it's very much like a condensed definition, the same as Ibn Kathir's. Next one, very famous text, Shar al-Muqasid. This is Muqasid by Alama Taftazani. And we are quoting from volume 5, pages 310 to 311. The battles between the Sahaba are proof that some companions left the right path and became zalim and fasik, because they became affected by jealousy, hatred, hypocrisy, a desire for power and indulgence, because not all the companions were just, nor was every individual who saw the Prophet good. Now note the difference now. Up until now, all the definitions that we've provided you is a kind of a broad brush consensus that it's irrelevant what trial or tribulation the Sahaba went through. And really, when they talk about that period of fitna, it is the era of Amir al-Mu'mineen, which saw the Sahaba essentially cutting each other's throats on the plains of Jamal, Safina, and Narwan. That's the era of fitna. And for the previous scholars, that didn't impact on their position as just and truthful individuals. But for Alama Taftazani, that was sufficient for him to make a conclusion that they had left the right path and became unjust, fasik. And essentially, that negates the concept that all the Sahaba are just individuals. And he says very clearly, nor was every individual who saw the Prophet good. And it's interesting, sorry, I'm just going to divert, as is my habit. I go off tangent now and then, but I'm trying to link it to, there's a tradition in Sahih Bukhari in Bab al-Fitan, which says that one of the concerns, because that I'm not scared that you'll become apostates after me, but I'm concerned that you'll cut one another's throats. I'll try and find that a bit later on. I'll give you the precise definition, but it kind of links to what Taftazani says. He kind of almost echoes that concern that the Prophet had, that Sahaba would be essentially killing each other, and this is what we're talking about. And for Alama Taftazani, that was sufficient to take individuals out of the definition that all the Sahaba are just. Now, interestingly, Qurtubi then manages to reel everybody back to the normal Sunni line in his book Al-Jami' al-Ahkam al-Quran, volume 19, page 350. All the companions were just and friends of Allah the Almighty and His chosen one amongst His creatures are the chosen one amongst His creatures after the Prophet and messengers. This is the view of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which was followed by the majority of the Imams of the Ummah. So essentially, he's simply saying the Sunni line is this: the majority of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah ulama position themselves in this manner, ascribing to a position that all the Sahaba are just, and essentially, he's essentially saying that we all need to fall behind that definition. If we then go to, I think Suyuti's book, Tadrib, on page 675, I know we've touched on Suyuti earlier. It gives another definition of Al-Mazri. Al-Mazri says in Shar al-Burhan, we don't mean that all the companions are just. Now, no, this is now we're going away from the topic, from the standard definition. I'll repeat it. We don't mean that all the companions are just, that whosoever saw the messenger any day or visited him or was with him for a reason and then went away. Rather, we mean for those companions that were steadfast with the messenger and respected and helped him So here we see a kind of quite a slight departure from the definition. It is very, it's almost kind of a backdrop to what Daftazani had said. Whereas all the other Sunni ulama that we'd been quoting thus far had said it's irrelevant of what they went through. The very fact that they were Sahaba, by definition, gives them a direct, how would one say it, immunity. They are just, and there can be nothing should be questioned about it. Daftazani suggested that the behavior of the Sahaba enabled you to provide a conclusion they were not all just. And then we've got this very interesting definition by Al-Mazri from Shar al-Burhan, who says very clearly, whilst he doesn't provide a criticism per se, he says very clearly that Sahaba that are just are those who remain steadfast with the messenger. So those who remain firm by his side, they are individuals that fall within the definition of just. And he makes it clearly. So it's whoever saw him. So we've got a kind of a breakdown, was with him and then went away. Rather, we mean it's not that definition. It's specifically those who stood side by side. They provided respect to him and helped him. So essentially, he's provided a criteria. The other ones hadn't provided a criteria, but here we have some kind of to be a just companion, you need to show respect for the Prophet and you need to aid him. Now, let's go to Khatib Baghdadi. Al-Kafaya fi Ilm Riwayah, volume 10, pages 80 to 81. A just person is someone who is known to practice his obligations and acts on what is commanded. Furthermore,
I think you may have already read that.
Apologies. Yes, I just noticed. Sorry, I've already touched on that. This is a bit more.
I was just seeing if Reza paying attention as well, but Reza didn't reply.
No, you're right. I noticed I was reading it. Apologies.
We're actually testing the viewers. We're just making sure they're actually listening.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad I was there. Okay. Right. Okay. In terms of, I'm just making sure we've got all of them.
I can show you screen.
Have we got through all of them and make sure?
Yeah, I think you've covered them pretty much. So obviously you can see that there's quite
Suyuti, Shawkani, Taftazani, Qurtubi, Suyuti. Yes, we've done them all now. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So essentially that gives us a definition. So brothers and sisters, note something. Not only was there, we in the previous episode we
can't see your camera. We can't see your.
Apologies.
Blessed faces.
Sorry. Bear with me a second. I will come back. Sorry about this, brothers. Okay. So essentially, what we've seen very clearly from the previous episode, not only is there no consensus of how Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah defines Sahaba, there's also no consensus really, although there is I would say a broad brush agreement on all the Sahaba being just. Maybe we would call it a consensus, but you do have some differing opinions. Okay. So even if there is that, it's not absolute 100% agreement. Daftazani clearly had a different position, whereas the majority Sunni opinion we'd say is by simply seeing the Prophet and falling within the definition of the Sahaba, they automatically, what comes with the baggage is the fact that they're all just. Daftazani said, well, to be honest, history evidences they weren't all just. They did partake in actions which would place them outside that definition. And then Jalaluddin Suyuti, who quoted a text which said, to be honest, justice is restricted to those who show respect.
I was going to say we probably hold a very close position to Daftazani on this.
Yeah, well. Absolutely, and that absolutely. I mean, that's something that we really don't dispute on that. Really, we actually urge people to think that same point. That if what Daftazani said, and inshallah ta'ala, Sayyid, I'm going to try, whilst you're talking on this topic, I will try and bring out the tradition from Bukhari on that, and I'll read it as well to the viewers. But you'll see that kind of it puts that into place as well. But as I said, so it's not clear cut. There is a difference of opinion. Okay, we accept 99%. Let's just say, apologies, 99% position this is the Sunni stance, but we have that. Two positions that we've quoted thus far. I'm sure there's more than that, which would suggest there's more to it. One is a criteria.
would be
respect
interesting.
Yep.
It would be interesting to see what fatwa they have on those scholars as well.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, you know, in this day and age, they'll probably be killed. But I think that's it. So, Dali, I want to ask you a question now.
But before you ask that question, why is it so crucial to discuss Adala in the sense that why are we questioning this whole issue when it comes to the integrity
Shall I reply?
These individuals? Yeah, Raza, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Go ahead. You can talk on that, please, brother.
Basically, it says these people take hadith from these individuals and claiming that all these people are just. Like, if we can prove they are unjust, then the hadith itself can be questioned. Those aqa'adi masail, those fiqhi masail can all be questioned from that. Because if somebody is unjust, let's say X, Y, and Z, and they said a certain thing, what should we take from them? If there's another companion on the side who is just, and they're saying, like, they're speaking correctly, and their history is being shown. And yeah, that's all I had to say.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I mean, I think that's precisely it. That the position is just that because they start from this, you know, like when you start from this base, that all the Sahaba are just. So it's almost like you build a foundation on that concept. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anything that you add on top, whatever materials you add on top, it has to concur with that foundation, because anything which conflicts with that foundation, the house that you're constructing falls apart. So they have essentially created a base. The foundation is that we start from the position that all the Sahaba, or we had two different views, but really the general Sunni position, and I apologize, it is a consensus, I would say a broad consensus. All the Sahaba are just. Fine. That's the foundation of the house. Now, every building block that's kind of placed on top of it has to concur with that position. Anything that conflicts with that position, essentially it knocks down that flooring. You know, it knocks the whole foundation down. The building falls apart. Let me give you an example. I mean, I was thinking about this myself just as we were going on here. That sometimes, you know, you get these sort of cowboy builders. They and I'm not in any way disrespecting the Sahaba by saying this. I'm just giving you an example. That sometimes you get cowboy builders and they'll build a kind of a dodgy foundation and construct a house on top of it. Now, and it's all of a sudden it emerges that foundation is weak. And if you start criticizing those builders, they'll give all manner of excuse to explain that the foundation is fine. They'll say, oh, there's something else, or the weather's affected it, blah, blah, blah. They won't want criticism of the building material or whatever foundation that they've created. That might be the problem. They'll try their best to try to explain away the problem because they don't want any criticism of the foundation that they've built. If the foundation that they've built is criticized, they're exposed. And I think essentially when we talk about believing that the Sahaba are just individuals, like Brother Ridha said, once we go into that concept and we've created a foundation, it's essential that when we're building the next level, we then have to say they're just individuals. Everything that they say is truthful, which means everything they attribute to the Prophet is truthful. Everything, their conduct is that of just individuals. That can't be called into question. Obviously, if anything conflicts with that, the foundation is weak and it all falls apart. And that lays open questions about the veracity and truthfulness of those individuals. Once you question the veracity, that whole foundation that's on which this whole house of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah has been constructed, that falls apart. So whilst I think that kind of, I've tried to explain that from that perspective. Say that there's something I want to ask you because
sorry, Hassan, I know I've kind of been you the question. I know you've been waiting to ask me the questions, but I like to ask you the question. Obviously, you can ask the viewers these questions as well. So ultimately, these individuals, they were witnesses to what essentially occurred during the time of the Holy Prophet, and peace and blessings be.
Yeah. Sorry, Shad, your line's a bit crackly. I can't hear you very clearly. I'm just gonna say again, bro.
Is my line okay?
Say again, please.
Yeah, Sayyid.
Yeah. Raza, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that's good. So if at any point it kind of cuts out, please do let me know, because I wouldn't be able to tell. You know what? I might turn my camera off if it helps. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Right. So am I coming through clear now?
That's better. Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Okay. So individuals were witnesses to what occurred during the time of the Holy Prophet, the peace and blessings be upon him.
Yeah.
So essentially, we learn not only historical accounts in terms of what took place on matters related to battles, but they were witnesses to many of these.
Hassan,
Your line.
Said Hassan, your earphones are bad.
You
Yeah,
need to stop
carry
using those things. Yeah. So
Yeah,
these
carry on.
individuals were not only witnesses to, well, they were ultimately the witnesses to most of the history that has reached many of the Muslims today, right?
Yeah.
And as we can see, you know, not only do we have this kind of like, well, the general opinion is that they were all just and truthful, even though there were other scholars who may have believed otherwise. When it comes to accepting their reports, there is no questioning regarding their integrity or their honesty.
Yeah.
So it's almost a form of blind acceptance in terms of the testimony. Okay, because a companion said this about the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family, essentially it means that it must be true, and we shouldn't question that.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So having said that, I mean, we know from the Holy Quran that the Quran also likewise requests people to bring witnesses. For example, when a person is going to pass away, or before they pass away, when they write a will, the Quran requests them to bring two witnesses as evidence of that will. So that will has some sort of position or authority in terms of its reliability, right, in the eyes of society. We know from an Islamic point of view, likewise, that a female's testimony is generally considered to be half the testimony of a male. Is that correct?
Correct.
So my question is here is, in terms of the wives of the Prophet, we know, for example, I mean, within Sunni literature, Aisha has narrated most of the Hadith within their books. Why is it that her narrations are accepted as isolated reports? I mean, of course, there may be other Sahaba who could witness some of these accounts, but generally speaking, you would find that she seems to have narrated a lot of these traditions, and they're quite isolated. Could we not also argue, well, hold on a minute, why is it when it comes to Aisha you don't ask for two witnesses, but you have no issue accepting her isolated reports?
Got it. Absolutely, and that's a very good question, Sayyid Ali. That is something that you do wonder. That how come there's no willingness to question that, all because an individual has benefited from, obviously it's a blessing. I'm not in any way doubting that. I don't think either any of us will be ever say the fact that individuals have seen the Prophet, that of course there's an honor and there's a merit in doing so. We would never question that. I think for us the difference is once those individuals that have seen it, did they maintain that position? Obviously it's an honor that they've acquired. Okay, did they live up to that honor? And does the fact that they've seen the Prophet automatically render them truthful in their conduct, in everything that they do? And does it automatically state that? Does it mean that we assume this blanket immunity that their character, their conduct can't be called into question? If they attribute something to the Prophet, do we blindly accept it? But say that, like you've just said, the Quran gives us a kind of a much more detailed how a single testimony on its own is not sufficient, like in that of a woman. But why, for example, do we just, without unquestionably, accept testimony of certain female Sahaba, such as the Prophet's wife Aisha? And I think that's a very, very good point. I mean, it's something that obviously is subject to, inshallah, in further shows we will discuss that. One thing you say that I want to discuss something because it's come quite topical now. I'll tell you what it is. There has been a suggestion that we also believe that all the Sahaba the Shia Sahaba is those who were the Sahaba of our Imams. We have this concept that they're all adul. So how can we take umbrage with the Sunni position when it mirrors that of the Shia position? I'm talking about certain narrations from, I think it's a Suli Kafi, and I noticed that there's a very prominent gym fanatic type of individual that frequents Hyde Park who enjoyed quoting this narration recently. So I'm just wondering whether, Sayyid Ali, are you familiar with those specific narrations? And how would you respond to them? The suggestion that all of the Sahaba of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam are just. So what right do we have to suggest that the Sahaba of the Prophet can't be?
Yeah, I think Brother Razak covered some of the traditions that talk about the virtue of the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon them, and the true righteous companions. I think he quoted Sahifa al-Sajidiyya, or it may well have been you.
That's what he called Al-Kaf al-Sharif and Sahifa. And the last one
and Al-Khasal.
Al-Khasal, well done.
Yeah. Al-Khasal, I think, in the number 12,000. So again, if they're going to try to use Shia Hadith to prove all the Sahaba, all 114,000 companions of the Prophet were just and truthful, they will fail, because we do not have any traditions which suggest all 114,000 companions of the Prophet were all just and truthful people. Even the narration from Al-Khasal is very limited to 12,000, and it excludes the hypocrites and the Kharijites and the Murajites, etc., etc. And likewise, it gives a very clear definition of who the Sahaba are. Yes, we do have some narrations in our books which often get misquoted to prove that all the companions of the Prophet were just and truthful people. A prime example to negate that concept straight away is our position about Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa is a respected individual within the Sunni school of thought. He is one of the Imams, jurists in terms of fiqh. He's very respected and revered, especially in the Indo-Pak continent and certain parts of the Middle East and Africa. And the Shia view regarding Abu Hanifa is that obviously, we don't really hold him in high regard. And having said that, neither did many Sunni Imams as well. I think we can do a show on that at a later time to show how some of the earlier Sunni Imams they rebuked Abu Hanifa because they found many of his fatwas contradicted Quran and obviously the Hadith. So Abu Hanifa would be a simple example to prove that we don't consider all the companions of the Prophet to be just and truthful. In terms of the Shia position or what Shia Hadith has said about the Adala of the Sahaba, whether or not all the Sahaba were truthful in narrating Hadith, I think I'd like to actually give me a minute. Let me bring up, stay with me. I'm just going to bring up the screen. Am I coming through, Claire?
Yeah, you are, Sayyid.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just going to screen share. So I'd like to bring up firstly Al-Ghafi, and this is taken from the PDF version of Al-Ghafi, which is also available online. And the chapter is called The Differences in Hadith. This is Al-Ghafi Volume 1, and this is available online. You can download it. Bab al-Ikhtilaf al-Hadith. And the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt have quite explicitly mentioned the different groups or the different types of individuals who were Sahaba who narrated Hadith from the Prophet. And this Hadith is, I'm just going to read it to you now. It says, just give me a minute to see if I can zoom up slightly more. The famous companion Sulaim ibn Qas al-Halali, who said the following: I once asked Imam Ali alayhi salam, I have heard from Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, certain matters about the interpretations of the Holy Quran and certain Hadith of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, which are different from such texts that others have. I have heard from you what confirms that which I have heard from Salman and his friends. I have heard great deal of hadith about the interpretations of the Holy Quran and the hadith of the Holy Prophet of Allah. Do you disagree with what I have heard from the other people, meaning the non-Shias, and consider such materials false? Okay. Do you think people ascribe lies to the Messenger of Allah purposely and interpret the Holy Quran by their own personal opinions? The Imam then said, yes. No, you have posed a question. Now listen carefully. And this is where we should listen carefully as well. What people have consist of truth and falsehood, what is abrogating and what is already abrogated, facts of general nature and particular nature, clear text and unclear text, facts properly memorized, and matters that are based on conjuncturally preserved. People have forged certain narrations they call hadith of the Holy Prophet. The condition was such that once the Holy Prophet addressed the people from the pulpit saying, "O people, many lies have spread around and they consider to be my hadith. Whoever forges lies and calls them a hadith has filled up his seat in hellfire." After the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, there was more such lies. There are 4 kinds of hadith only, and there is no 5th kind. As you can see, that even during the time of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family, there were hadith that were falsely ascribed to the Prophet. That he ascended the pulpit, and he even said that, look, there are many lies spread about me, okay, and these lies are not true. And this is also where there's a famous hadith from the Prophet that says that whosoever lies upon me intentionally will reserve himself a seat in hellfire. And this narration is something which is accepted both by the Shia school and the Sunni school. So something to the Prophet which is not true has serious repercussions to it, and it's a serious matter. So you could understand now how even during the time of the Prophet, those around him would take precaution in narrating things about the Prophet which may not have been true. So the Imam alayhi Islam categorizes hadith in 4 different types. And I will actually, the same hadith, this tradition I'm just reading now is from Al-Kafi. I will actually bring it up for you in Najr al-Balagha. It's found in Najr al-Balagha as well, and it's in Sermon 209. Again, Najr al-Balagha is available online. It's a sayings and doings of Imam alayhi salam. It contains numerous letters, etc., etc. And the chapter is called someone asked Imam Ali alayhi salam about the concocted traditions and contradictory sayings of the Prophet. The reason why I'd skipped to this is because it quite nicely presents the different types of hadith that were presented. It's exactly the same hadith which I mentioned earlier from Al-Kafi. So as you can see, it talks about the first type, the lying hypocrites. The second type, those who are mistaken. The third type, those who are ignorant. The fourth type, those who accurately memorize the hadith of the Prophet. When you got the opportunity, by all means, I would recommend you to read the 4 different types of hadith. And obviously, when it comes to the 4th group, naturally, those who accurately memorize the hadith of the Prophet, we would refer that to the Ahlul Bayt or Imam Ali alayhi salam, who we believe are the who we believe is the inheritor of the Prophet's knowledge, and he would thus fall into the 4th group, those who actually memorized. So as you can see, there were different groups of people who Imam Ali alayhi salam described narrating hadith of the Holy Prophet on matters of anything. It could be about history, etc., etc. And I just want to skip quickly the very important hadith as well. And this is from the very same chapter on the differences of hadith. Because I noticed in a recent rebuttal, there's a dialogue between a Shia and a Sunni brother, and I believe the Sunni brother quoted this hadith from this chapter, stating that Shias believe all the companions of the Prophet were all just people. Just stay with me a minute. Okay, here's the hadith. Okay, so this is from Al-Kafi, Volume 1, Hadith number 191, Chapter 21, Hadith 3. And is Mansur ibn Hazim who said the following: once I said to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Oh, what's happened to my screen? Oh, sorry, just give me a second. Lost it for a minute. Apologize. Okay, here it is. Can you hear me? Is my voice coming through clear?
Yeah, it's fine, Said.
Okay, brilliant. So this is from, oh, start again. All right, just give me a second. I think every time I stop screen sharing, it does that. So third time lucky. Okay, so once I asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, it confuses me when I ask you a question, you give me an answer. Then another comes to you and you give a different answer for the same question. The Imam replied, we answer people in larger and reduced form. I then asked, this is a very crucial part, this is the part which is often quoted in dialogues. Did the companions of the Prophet speak the truth or lies when narrating hadith? The Imam said they spoke the truth. I then said, why then do they have differences? The Imam said, have you not considered the fact that a man would come to the Messenger of Allah and ask him a question and he would give an answer, then he would give an answer that would abrogate the previous answer. Thus the hadith abrogate hadith. So in order to justify this concept that all the companions of the Prophet were just and truthful, they would present this hadith as evidence of that, for that. However, as you can see, this narration has absolutely nothing to prove that all the companions were truthful. The reason for that is, number one, the Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali alayhi salam, has very categorically explained the four groups or the four different types of hadith that have reached us. Within one of those categories, Imam Ali alayhi salam talks about the hadith of abrogation and how some people, due to the relationship that they had towards the Prophet, due to their closeness, i.e., for example, his progeny or even his wives, they may have a better understanding of a hadith of the Prophet compared to other Sahaba who may not be aware of it. A simple example can be on the issue of crying for the dead. When you read the hadith found in Sahih Muslim, there's an account where Aisha has a dispute with Abdullah ibn Umar regarding the permissibility for mourning the dead. Abdullah ibn Umar narrates a hadith on the authority of his father, Umar ibn Khattab, stating that those individuals who mourn for the dead, they will be, the dead will suffer punishment in the grave for that. And at that point, Aisha, she corrected Abdullah ibn Umar and said, no, this is not true. Rather, the punishment is for those who are not Muslim and those who weep for them, their dead will face the punishment. So as you can see, due to the relationship that Aisha may have had, because obviously because she was part of the Prophet's household, her understanding of halal and haram was something more closer to the likes of Abdullah ibn Umar. And Abdullah ibn Umar was a faqih, he was a jurist, which again, each Sahaba is not the same. There are some Sahaba who were known for their knowledge, who can fatwas. Other Sahaba were not. By definition, Sahaba was anybody who was in the proximity of the Prophet and just left. Doesn't necessarily mean that this individual spent time, fought alongside the Prophet or gained the necessary knowledge of Islam. So when we talk about this particular hadith, this hadith is only related to matters of abrogation, on matters of halal and haram. It has got nothing to do with the fact of what we're going to be discussing in future episodes, and that is proving that some of these individuals were not truthful and were in fact indeed liars, as we can demonstrate from the books of our brothers. And Hassan Pari, I'm going to pass it back to you. I've been going on for a bit too much. We can't hear you, Hassan Bari. Your microphone.
That has on your microphone still muted.
Yeah, sorry, brothers. There was a narration that I had touched on just briefly when I talked about Taftazani's narrative. Basically, he did say that some of the Sahaba fell into fisk during that particular, historically there's evidence that they weren't just on account of their actions. And I did touch on a narration from Sahih Bukhari on that. If it's okay, I will just quickly give that narration, just in case anyone wants to cross-reference it. If you bear me a second.
Yeah, Hassan Bahari, I just want to point out something as well. If you just
Please.
give me a minute. I believe I may have quoted some references in the previous show, and I may have misquoted them. So I just want to correct myself.
Actually, do you want to correct that while I look up something? Do that now. Yeah?
Yeah, sure. If you just give
Please.
me a second, I'm just going to try to find it for you. Because if I make a mistake, I do appreciate if the brothers let me know, because I got contacted by a brother, a Sunni brother, and he did say that I quoted something.
Do you want me to go through my bit while you're looking it up, or?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So there's two things that I think I want to just touch on. You know, something that you said. Obviously, the knowledge base of the Sahaba was different. You know, there's something that you said, that there was a dispute between Abdullah ibn Umar and Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, and she corrected his position. You know, so basically what his understanding of a hadith differed to what she'd said. So, you know, even that conflicts with the concept of the just and the truthful. And all because people benefited from sitting in the midst of the Prophet does not mean that they acquired every aspect of knowledge from him. One needs to understand that merely sitting with him doesn't mean you was immediately imparted with every facet of knowledge that the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family had. In that connection, there's a tradition in Sahih Bukhari in Kitab al-Adab, in Sunan Abu Dawood, it's a Sahih hadith number 58182. Abu Musa asked Umar for permission to enter the house. He went with Abu Sa'id, who testified to it. He said, did this practice of the Messenger of Allah remain hidden from me? So asking permission. And then Umar says, my engagement in the transaction in the market made me oblivious of it. Now give me salutation as you wish, and do not ask permission. So see what I'm saying? Even the fact that a prominent Sahaba sat in the midst of the Prophet, you didn't have this specific knowledge on this topic, asking for permission when you enter a house. He wasn't aware of it. So, you know, it could be that, you know, the understanding is different, knowledge base is different. So if when we go into the details, and I think Sayyid Ridha is going to talk about this concept of criticizing narrators, there can be a difference on truthfulness just based on knowledge base. One Sahaba might have an understanding which is very limited because he didn't benefit that much from the Prophet's company. He may not have been there when a certain tradition was narrated, but whereas another Sahaba was there and understood it better. I mean, you know what? There's an even clearer tradition on this. If you don't mind, if I just quickly read it, kind of gives us a better understanding. And this one is from Sahih Bukhari. This is from book 96, hadith number 80. Abu Musa asked permission to enter upon Umar, but seeing that he was busy, he went away. Umar then said, didn't I hear the voice of Abdullah bin Qais? Allow him to come in. He was called in, and Umar said to him, what made you do what you did? He replied, we've been instructed by the Prophet. Umar said, listen to this carefully, bring proof, witnesses for this, otherwise I will do so and so to you. Then Abdullah bin Qais went to a gathering of the Ansar, who then said, none but the youngest of us will give witness for it. So Abu Sa'id Khudri got up. We used to be instructed thus. So he's confirming it. Umar said, the tradition of the Prophet remained hidden from me. Business in the market kept me busy. So again, do you see what I'm saying? Sayyid Ali, do you understand that, brother?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Can I add something to that as well?
It's interesting, isn't it, that narration? You know, like this in itself lays, you know, questions on the Sahaba being truthful.
Well,
and, in terms of understanding.
If Rizal makes his point, I mean, I was hoping to do a separate show just on that one narration.
We will, inshallah.
But it just goes to show, you know, it goes back to our point in terms of abrogation. certain
Yeah.
Sahaba were aware of things which other Sahaba.
Absolutely. So that's why I was trying to link it really to that, to say, all because this concept of just and truthfulness, it could well be very limited because one Sahaba's knowledge base is limited.
Yeah.
It might be contradicted by another Sahaba who's acquired more knowledge because he's...
we can even link that to the issue of muta. For example, some people say that Ibn Abbas was not aware of the abrogation, even though he was. That's the topic for another time.
Yeah.
And also the one with tayammum, Umar ibn Khattab and Ammar ibn Yasir.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm going to just quote one more thing. Sorry, Said. There was that tradition of Taftazani, which I mentioned.
Hassan Bahari. There's something else that we can learn from this as well. Because, if we're saying that all the companions were just and truthful people, why did Umar doubt the testimony of that companion?
And not just doubt, he was prepared to give him a beating.
He was prepared to hit him or whatever he was.
Yeah, he was going to punish him. So that's how, that was the lack of trust that he had in the individual. He thought that he was actually lying.
Hassan Bahari, Umar did not have this belief himself.
Yeah.
Where did this Aqidah come from?
Yeah, I think that we'll probably expand on that, inshallah ta'ala, in different shows. But if you let me just quote one more thing before you go through the corrections. This is from the book of military expeditions, Sahih Bukhari, book 64, Hadith 427. The reason I'm quoting it, Taftazani, he questioned the concept that all the Sahaba are just and truthful. And it kind of links to the narration of the Prophet at the last Hajj. The Prophet ordered me, this is from Jarir, probably Jarir ibn Abdullah. The Prophet ordered me during Hajjat al-Wada, asked the people to listen. He then said, do not become infidels after me by cutting the necks, that's the throats of one another. And the tradition says clearly the word kufr. So even here, we've got the hadith of the Prophet saying, don't become apostates by killing each other. And then obviously we've got Taftazani's analysis saying that after the death of the Prophet, certain activities of the Sahaba calls into question whether they're all just or not. That's basically what I wanted to kind of point out. Sayyid, do you want to quickly go through the corrections?
So the corrections, in terms of corrections, I just want to point out, again, where we kind of got cut off in the previous episode, we started on the definition of adala, right? Which we clarified at the start of today from Nusrat al-Nadr, and it was page number 205, which I believe that was a correct page, which we also showed today in terms of the numbering. Mawardi was not the same author of Ahkam al-Sultaniya, even though his name was Mawardi as well, but that was a different Mawardi mentioned in the first episode. Al-Qafaya is in one volume. For some reason, I don't know why it was written down as 10, so apologies for that. And one more last thing, I believe it was Tadrib al-Rawi, not Tadrib al-Rawaya. And again, the correction has been mentioned in this one in terms of showing the correct passage for it. Hassan Bahari, just one quick point. I remember another narration which often gets used, and this is from Sheikh Amli's book. I believe it's, if you just give me a minute, I'll see if I can find it. It's one of the lies made by our opponents, and that is that Sheikh Amli claims that anyone who's a companion of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, we have no reason to deny him, or we have no reason to doubt what he's got to say. This is a complete false lie. He never said that at any point. The statement's been taken out of context completely. And as I presented earlier, the example of Abu Hanifa, right? We know we have traditions mentioned about Abu Hanifa from Al-Kafi, which where the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam seriously rebukes him for his qiyas that he did, his conjuncture, especially when it comes to giving fatwas based on Quran Hadith. There's a lot of his rulings, as far as we concerned, opposed it. So the narration that they give is from Sheikh Amli, and it's taken from his book. Give me a minute. Amal al-Amli, volume 1, page number 82 and 83. It's a long narration, and Sheikh Amli quotes a particular narrator who was from amongst the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And he talks about his reliability, whether he's accepted or not. And he mentions that, there was some of our scholars did praise him, Some of our scholars didn't praise him. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and read the whole narration, but not at any point, there's nothing in there to suggest that just because this individual was a companion of Imam Sadiq alayhi Islam, we would automatically accept his testimony. In fact, many of the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi Islam, as far as we're concerned as well, they were not included all as being Shia. Okay, there were many non-Shia students of Imam Sadiq, and this is why if you look at the scholars of Hadith, when they spoke about the biographies of some of the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi Islam, they may have remained skeptical over some of them, they may have criticized some, etc., etc. So again, just want to make it clear, we do not have any traditions in our books which suggest or imply that all the companions of the Imams of Islam were just and truthful people. And again, we don't take their views as hujjah. Yeah, I know, like somebody mentioned in one of the shows recently, on one of the channels, he said, "Oh well, a scholar said this, therefore a scholar's view is not hujjah upon them." But ironically, they'll accept the scholar's view when it comes to authenticating narrators of hadith. Obviously, when it comes to Sahaba, they don't question that generally. But when it comes to other individuals, they'll accept their criticism or their appraisal of that individual. Sahabi, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you want to add anything further to that point I just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's amazing that some of those scholars are accepted without question.
Imams of the religion.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are the imams of the religion, but whose obviously fatwas. And to be honest, say, something, when we talk about these sort of scholars, I think it's important to remember that, when we've got these major imams giving fatwas, they're not, when scholars give fatwas, it's, they do that on the basis of on the basis of text. So if they are giving fatwas, major types of fatwas on issues such as racial bigotry and Arab nationalism, simply dismissing it because they're not fallible doesn't really wash. Those same scholars, you happily embrace all of their fatwas on issues such as, oh well, they believe that Shias are apostates. You'll have a long list of these same scholars saying that, but when these same scholars then suddenly say, oh, by the way, non-Arabs are not equal to Arabs, and give issue edicts on that position, all of a sudden, those scholars can be dismissed because they're just fallible individuals. You can't just pick and choose. And isn't it funny, Sayyid Ali?
And they all seem to go wrong, Hassan Murray.
Say again?
All ironically seem to have got it wrong as well. Their main imams.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're all wrong.
They're all wrong. And these guys know.
Picking.
Isn't it funny, Sayyids, both of you Sayyids, you know what? Isn't it really unusual that if our scholars say something, that has to be hooked on us?
Yeah.
You understand? We can say automatically, look at what your scholar says. If we say, oh, well, our scholars are not infallible, oh, forget it, your scholar said it, you're an apostate on that basis. But
especially when they use Al-Kaf al-Sharif.
Exactly. As I said, Murtada, for example, if he has a viewpoint, oh, well, it's hujjah on you. But it's not hujjah on you for your scholars to make racist comments.
But they'll happily take the opinions of their scholars who came hundreds of years later after these narrators and write biographies on them. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. It is amazing. It is amazing. So that have you kind of covered your points?
Yeah, then? I think that's about it. I mean, in terms of the categories of hadith that have reached us, as you can see, Imam Ali Islam in Najr al-Balagha, I believe the tradition is also mentioned in Kitab Salam ibn Qais, and in Al-Kafi, and you can see the Imams categorized 4 different types of hadith that have reached us, different groups.
Good. I think so. If we can now go to the final part, really, of the discussion for this evening. Sayyid Ridha, can you talk about the concept of accepting and criticizing narrations? Explain what the Arabic doctrine is, and kind of expand on it, and that will kind of lead us into the next episode. So, over to you, Sayyid Ridha.
All right, Sayyid. Assalamu alaikum first. Let me just share my screen. Everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Yep. So, yep.
Yes, perfect.
Oh, nice. Okay, it's just we're going to be speaking about Jarh wa Ta'dil. Basically, Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil is a science of the sciences of Hadith dealing with identifying the narrators, whether they are reliable or not. Al-Jarh is finding a deficiency, whether it is in the righteousness or his accurateness, or in both, or of the deficiency in his righteousness. Then the Hadith will fall under Mawdu' and Matruk. If the deficiency is in accurateness, then the Hadith will fall under Da'if, Munkar, Muttarrab, Mushaf, Maqlub, or Mudraj. Now, At-Ta'dil is describing the narrators in his righteousness and accurateness, what is required for acceptance his narration. The acceptance of the narration will fall under Hadith Mutawatir, Sahih, Hasan, and their types. Its purpose is to keep Islam safe. Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil is Fard Kifaya, which means it is only required on some, not all. Fard al-Ain means it is required on all Muslims. And the sources are منظور في قواعد العجر الجرح والتعديل. So منظومة في قواعد الجرح والتعديل and كتاب العلل للإمام أحمد and قواعد الجرح والتعديل مقدمة في الجرح والتعديل. That's part of Imam Ahmad. Basically, guys, before I go to the scans, this is just a way for us to differentiate between just companion and not to see what he's narrating is correct or not. Are you guys with me so far? Zaid Hassan, Said Ali? Okay. Now, basically, I'm going to give one of the scholars' opinions. The تفريق والتيسير مع.
Fine.
Okay, now I'm just going to give one of the scholars' opinion of how he explained Jarh al-Ta'dil, which is technically the same definition we had above. I was just trying to show you. Now, التفريق والتيسير لمعرفة البشير والنذير إمام محي الدين النووي. This is from Imam al-Nawawi. Now, page 52 and 53, with the arrangement of Ibn Hatim. So he's now saying that this is how Ibn Hatim arranges his Jarh al-Ta'dil. This is for the Jarh part. Now, the highest rank is reliable, perfect, proven, justly preserved, and accurate. So, as we've seen before, Sahih, what do you call it? Sahih, Hasan, and everything. But this is just Thiqa, Ghayr Thiqa, and etc. And the second ranking is truthful, and there's nothing wrong with this hadith. And the third ranking is considerate, like we consider this narration. And the fourth ranking is trustworthy for the narration. Now, and the last part, and for the Jarh pronunciation, the term Jarh falls into levels. If they say his hadiths are soft, his hadiths are written, but they are studied with consideration. And Ad-Darqutni said if they say soft hadith, he is unreliable, but has a bad trait that doesn't necessarily make him not udul. And saying not strong, we write his hadith, but he's lower than the soft. And if they say weak hadith, he's weaker than not strong, still not dropped but considered. And if they say matruk or weak, a liar, he is not dropped, his hadith are not written. Now, here's the scans. Everybody can see the scans?
Sorry, Said, just a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
For some strange reason, someone just informed me that we can't actually see your screen, but on my laptop I can see it. Hassan Hari, can you just confirm that as well? Can you unshare your screen and try screen sharing again?
Yeah, try again, Saeed. I can't see it either.
For some strange reason, it's not coming up.
Hold on. Okay.
Just have a quick try again.
I'm now saying you are screen sharing. So Hassan, can you see it?
Yes, Saeed, I can see that.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to the scans. Now, this is the scans for Ta'dil. Basically, it's just ranking within if hadith is authentic, Hasan, and so on.
Yeah.
Now, from saying that, I wanted to go to one particular point. Now, it says if they say matruk or weak or liar, he is dropped. His hadith are not written. That's number one. And the second thing, weak hadith, his hadith is weaker than strong, still not dropped but considered. Now, here's a question. Now, if the hadith is weak and it's not dropped, why should we still consider it? Now, that's the thing I'm trying to say. Now, is that just because? Now, is it because of this concept of adala? Like, why would we take it if it's like weakened? I'm going to leave that for you guys. Like, that's my only question. Yeah.
You need to stop your screen share. Brilliant.
Nice.
So, yeah. So, Daddy, do you want to expand on that?
Well, I don't know, what can I say? I mean, obviously they have a science which has been introduced to, it's ultimately been designed to make criticism and praise of narrators of Hadith. We know when it comes to Sahaba, there's generally no criticism, there's no questioning. Whatever they say is going to be, is considered to be, true. But when it comes to narrators of traditions, obviously they go into that science and they make, they make evaluation of an individual, whether he's reliable, whether he's not reliable, whether he has bad memory, whether he has good memory, etc., etc.
Hence, if he has bad memory or not, but somehow, like for example, Zayd ibn Arqam, he has a hadith in Sahih Muslim. When he had a bad memory, I forgot which hadith it was, but still they accept this hadith and it's authentic. Like that's a double standard, I find it. Like here you're saying something, but here you're saying something else.
Yeah. I think one of the arguments they might try to give is that, well, okay, we only accept the hadith that comes from him before he got bad memory, right?
Yeah.
But even so, they may argue that, well, okay, we only accept his traditions from the point where he started having we stop at the point where he started to have bad memory, and we don't accept anything after that. But okay, Zayd bin Arqam, he's one example, right? But again, when we look at the other companions, what a companion cannot start to have a deficiency in memory. Can they not forget hadith of the Prophet?
Yeah.
The thing is, it's not just about, okay, he can forget, cool, no problem with that. How can we still accept this hadith? That's what I'm trying to say. He's forgetting. Like something is missing from this for all I care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just the issue of bad memory, Hassan Hari, but what if the individual is proven to be a liar?
Exactly.
What if we can demonstrate, the same point as Taftazani? Because Taftazani said that some of these individuals, they started showing, is it fisk he mentioned?
Yeah, fisk.
Fisk, and then he also mentioned the fact that they became jealous. So even jealousy, according to him, excluded some of these individuals out of the definition of the Dala of the Sahaba. I don't know, Hassan Bari, if you want to go quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, if you, it's for me, for example, say, when I think about, I'm a lawyer by profession, and like, for us, we've got to have certain types of principles to practice law. If our conduct falls low of that, we bring the profession into disrepute. Do you see what I'm saying? So if we have a certain type of conduct that's exposed, for example, if I'm involved in fraudulent activity or I get involved in some sort of scandal, that brings a profession into disrepute, and I am essentially removed from the role as a solicitor, okay? Because I don't meet that criteria anymore because of my poor conduct. And I think exactly the same, to the extent that my testimony will no longer be accepted as that as a solicitor. They'll say that, to be honest, your conduct fell well below par what's expected of an individual in your profession. You've disgraced yourself, you've disgraced your profession, you no longer can just refer to yourself as a lawyer. And it's exactly the same thing, that if we look at the definition of Sahaba, okay, it's individuals that benefit from the Prophet, fine. But what happens thereafter? If their conduct, clearly Sayyid, or both of you Sayyids here today, let's have a think. Obviously, being a Sahaba brings with it some responsibility, does it not? Does it not mean sitting in the midst of the Prophet, it's an honor, no doubt. But surely you've got responsibility as well, don't you? You are the individuals that will be essentially the standard bearers of the religion. You'll be there saying, look, we sat in the midst of the Prophet. This is what we heard him saying. But if
we sat with him for a mist of a second, but that was good enough.
Even if for argument's sake it is, okay? If you're going to say that we have taken this opportunity, and like we've sat, albeit for a day or two, you go back to your people and say, listen, I'm a person that has seen the Prophet. There'll be an expectancy that that individual, having been sat in the midst of the Prophet, he has commanded a level of respect, but with that respect, there is a responsibility comes with it, does it not? That you behave and you conduct yourself in a manner that merits your definition of Sahaba. What did Tafsirani say? Historically, he gave examples where individuals' character, conduct fell below par. And yet it makes you question, come on, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm a Sahaba because I saw the Prophet, but then if you're then partaking in activities such as, and I'm not in any way saying any specific Sahaba, we'll inshallah go into a series on that. But if Sahaba are then, the Prophet said that killing each other, a Muslim is kufr. So if Sahaba are doing just that, do they not fall within that definition? If they steal, if they lie, if they rape, if they're involved in rebellions against the head of state, if they're involved in these sort of actions, does that not call their position of being just individuals into question?
Just before you come to conclusion, I just want to bring up a verse of the Holy Quran so our viewers can have a read of this. And this kind of ties into our topic of discussion today in discussing what Dawah is, right? So I just want to quickly screen share. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from the famous tafsir by the famous, by the individual known as Maulana Maududi, the Sayyid Abdul Maududi, very respected individual, especially in the Tablighi Jamaat, wasn't he? Or was he Deobandi?
Jamaat Islami.
Jamaat Islami, yeah. He's very respected, I think, even for the Deobandi.
Well known even in the Middle East. His books have been translated in Arabic as well.
So this is a famous commentary of the Holy Quran, and this is in Surah Yasin. And it's just a quick background in Surah Yasin, and it says, the period of revelation. A study of the style shows it was either sent down during the last stage of the middle of Meccan period, or it was of those surahs which were sent down during the last stages of the Holy Prophet's day in Mecca. Right, Hassan Bahari?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we know that from history now, for example, I believe the Prophet may have spent between 10 to 15 years within Mecca.
Yeah.
So according to Maulana Maududi, he mentions that this Surah Yasin was revealed in that period, in the last, 10 to 15 years of the time before he made migration.
Yeah.
Now, I want to bring up something very interesting in this verse. This is in Surah Yasin. I want you to pay close attention to this, okay? So it starts, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the name of Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful. And it says, by the wise Quran, you are indeed one of the messengers and are on a straight way. And this Quran is a revelation of the Almighty and the All-Merciful One, so that you may warn people whose forefathers were not warned, and so they live in headlessness. Now, whose forefathers was the Prophet referring to here?
Of course.
Obviously referring to the Sahaba who were around in the time of the Prophet. Okay? Then the verse continues, and it says, it's very important. I want you to pay very close attention. Now remember, at this point, this surah was revealed after the Prophet had spent maybe 10 to 15 years in Mecca. Okay? Most, in surah, it says in verse 7 to 11, most of these people have already deserved the decree of torment. Therefore, they do not believe. We have put on their necks fetters which reach to their chins, so they stand with their heads upright. We have set a barrier before them and a barrier behind them. We have covered them, so that they cannot see anything. It is as all the same for them, whether you warn them or warn them not. They would not believe. You can only warn him who follows the domination or fears the merciful God, though he cannot see him. He gives the good news of forgiveness and of the generous reward. So in conclusion, Hassan Bahari, according to this verse of the Holy Quran, despite the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, spending 10 to 15 years in Mecca, after the propagation of Islam, those people who accepted Islam, Hassan Buhari.
Yeah, I'm listening. Yep.
The Quran had already made it clear, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already made it clear that these people, the decree for them is the torment of the eternal punishment of hellfire.
Yeah.
What do you say about that, Hassan Buhari?
Absolutely. I mean, that in itself exposes that position. And it kind of
even the Holy Quran doesn't even accept this concept that all the companions are just and truthful.
Absolutely.
Surah Yasin makes it very clear.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That most people who accepted Islam, they will be in hellfire. They'll be in hellfire.
So saying this just such an obviously we can't. I mean, the Quran is like the once we go to the Quran, that sets the position absolutely clear. You know, we've already talked about this. Even logically, saying just simply sitting in the midst of the Prophet, how does that automatically render you every single action as you do as that of just person and truthful?
That's what I was trying to get at before. Sorry, I'm cutting off. I was
Yeah,
trying to get at asking those questions, like how, logically speaking, like it just doesn't make sense. Any decent common sense of mind, it does not make sense or will not make sense. Even as Sahabi wonderfully mentioned, like even the Quran goes against this. The Quran itself goes against this.
Yeah,
inshallah, we'll go into these verses. We're going to go in great detail.
Yeah,
inshallah.
Yeah.
So,
inshallah, I think that kind of well, I think in conclusion, if it's okay, I will conclude simply by saying, in the first episode, we proved that there's no consensus on what the doctrine of the Sahaba, definition of Sahaba is. In this one, I think, apologies, there's some confusion earlier, but there is a general consensus that amongst Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, with a few differing voices, but the general consensus is all the Sahaba. So anyone who falls in the definition of Sahaba, they're all truthful and they're just men. Then when it comes to truthfulness, their ability to narrate a hadith of the Prophet can never be called into question because they are Sahaba. What we've done is we've touched on that very slightly and we've logically discussed it, and obviously from Quranic proof today to say, well, to be honest, that is a flawed concept. It isn't logical. It isn't based on any text. It's just simply based on, because the foundation, like I said, the foundation of a house, the foundation that they've created is that all the Sahaba are just. Every other material that they've built thereafter has to go back to that foundation. Whether that's true or not, we've already discussed it today. To say, to be honest, it doesn't stand the test of time. It doesn't stand logic. It doesn't stand the Quran. It doesn't stand history. None of that goes with it. Sahaba killed each other. They fought each other. They raped their women. There's all manner of evidence. Yeah, there are many, many examples where historically they would not be deemed as just individuals through their conduct. And then we've got the Surah Yasin, and obviously we've got logic. If we put those three together, the doctrine that all the Sahaba are just and truthful by merely seeing the Prophet, albeit for a nanosecond, just to believe that is illogical, and inshallah. Yes, go on, say that. Do you want to add something else?
No, I'm just saying it's just a logical fallacy.
Yeah, it's a logical fallacy. Inshallah, I think that concludes it. Sayyid Ali, do you want to add anything, or shall I conclude things then for the evening?
No, thank you very much for.
I think that kind of.
Just to point out, Hassan Buhari, just in case, the reason why we show scans to everything is people have the opportunity to go out there and actually purchase the books. Nobody can say, "Oh well, I don't believe this is some sort of Shia fabricated book." The books are there. Go to you don't have to go to Alhamdulillah, Shia bookshops do tend to sell Sunni books as well. But yeah, by all means, go to a Sunni bookshop and purchase these books. These books are available online, so you can actually you can buy them yourself and verify these texts.
Even these days, say that because people don't accept online scans, they want to see the actual book. But alhamdulillah, most of us, nearly all of our scans, we push them and we're scanning them ourselves.
Exactly.
I think that concludes things for this evening. I think, brothers. Thank you for listening. Inshallah ta'ala, we will continue our discussion. We're not sure of the day yet. We will let viewers know 2 days beforehand.
We've got a
Remember,
lot of projects going on.
exactly. Remember us all in your du'as as we shall remember you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.